complain that that's what all the beer aficionados really are bragging on that. I wish it was. Not too bad.
You all set?
You were on point on that one.
You guys ready?
Let's hope they don't
You all set
all
there?
walk out at 7:30.
Exactly.
Yes.
Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for November 20th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thanks everybody for coming tonight. Tonight we have a large agenda. We have multiple meetings to approve. We have a 705 tax classification hearing. Our local state representatives here. Mr. Blair from the Historic Society is going to give us an update. We have multiple discussion items. We have a traffic sign one, plowing of private ways, salt and sand purchases. We have a representative to talk about Heritage Park. We have another signage out of 147 North Street. We have appointments to various boards. We have to approve liquor license renewals. We have a request for an extension of a liquor license. We have some non-disclosures by non-municipal employees. And we're going to discuss the master plan, downtown revitalization in FY 2020. Okay, we got 3 minutes. Somebody want to make a motion for the minutes?
Make a motion that we approve the regular session meeting minutes from October 16th and October 30th and November 13th.
I second that.
Making sure that it's unanimous action.
And also make a motion to approve the executive session meeting minutes from October 16th.
I second the motion.
And that's unanimous action. Let's see, what can we do? So I'm going to invite the state rep up. He's here to give us a little brief, but I don't want to cut you short. Just trying to think here. At 7:05, I have to open up the tax hearing, so I just want to open that at 7:05, and then I'll just pause it. And let
Sure.
you finish it, so.
No, I greatly appreciate that.
Get in and out, sir.
I don't know if everyone in this room is here for me or what else is on this agenda.
It's always like this.
Yeah, of course. No, it's going to be the 7 o'clock meeting
It's
now, right? So listen, I just wanted to come in and first and foremost say thank you to the town of Upton. Obviously, thank the three of you for running and leading the town, but also thank you to all the people who generously put their vote towards me in November and gave me at least 2 more years to be your voice. It's something I take very seriously. I take a lot of pride in being the state representative of the 9th Worcester District. I take a ton of pride in being the rep of all 3 communities. I do want to let you know that while some people think that the legislature breaks at the end of July in the second year of a session and we do nothing but campaign, there's still been a ton of work that's been going on. One of the biggest things was actually signed on October 23rd. It was a supplemental budget that was passed. This budget had many things in it, including $15 million for school safety initiatives, $7.5 million of that's for security upgrades through K through 12 public schools. Another $7.5 million was going towards hiring of mental health and behavioral health specialists. So that's a wonderful thing to obviously be supportive of. And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
So I'm just gonna open up the 705 tax classification public hearing. You just get a motion to table it for a minute.
I make a motion to table the 7:05 public hearing meeting.
Second that?
Recess. Sorry, recess. Recess.
I'll make a motion to
You can
recess
show
the
it's
public hearing.
Not section. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was an additional $5 million allocated there to help school districts with high concentration of low-income students carry out targeted intervention and turnaround efforts to address the student achievement gaps. Another wonderful thing to stand behind. There was $10 million for clean drinking water projects in the Commonwealth, $10 million for the Community Preservation Act Trust Fund, And one of the bigger ones that I was certainly proud to let you know about right away is there was an additional $40 million into the Chapter 90 formula, which for those that aren't aware is for roads and bridges and things of that nature, where Upton was lucky enough to receive $313 or so thousand before, because this is additional to the $200 million authorization that we did earlier this year. This is going to give us another 62,700 and change that we're going to be able to put out to try to fix our infrastructure. So
Great.
that's a welcome addition. So that brings total funding for over $1.5 million to the 9th Worcester District. So I'm very proud of that. Another thing just to highlight quickly was the $43,000 that we're able to secure and keep so far for public safety improvements here for Upton. This is about the time of year that you would see 9C cuts come down the pipeline. Luckily, we're in a very good state in terms of projected revenue. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything will continue to be good, but we're looking really good right now. So if they haven't reached out to you already, I would imagine that someone will be reaching out in terms of the public safety earmark. If they haven't, please let me know. You have, perfect, wonderful. Also, I want to let you know a couple of session highlights. I'm proud to have supported a key number of initiatives that have been signed into law, workplace protection laws, including the Massachusetts Pay Equity and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, legislation to support our first responders through crisis management, a comprehensive criminal justice bill, which we were able to get included a study as to correction officers and the suicide rates. That's something that once I had heard about it, I wanted to make sure it was a priority to get included in there. And I'm proud to say that it was included in the final version. We supported an increase in the senior tax exemption program, supported veteran legislation that would further honor and protect the men and women who fought for our country. Those are just a couple of the issues that we were able to tackle this year. It sounds like we've done a lot, and we did. There's still a ton more to do. I think reforming mass health is something that the administration and I would love to look at. But one of the biggest things is finding a fair and equitable funding source for the foundation budget. I think we need to do what we can to look at that, try to get more money back to help our schools for all of our cities and towns. The last thing I want to say is that since I've been elected, I've instituted a coat drive every year. And it's a way to give back again to the community. We collect new and gently used coats for adults and children, and they in turn are getting dispersed back to our schools and to our local DCF office and to Piece of Bread, which is in Northridge, which covers a lot of the individuals in this region. So that's going to be coming up Thursday, November 29th. It's going to be at the Grafton Legion Hall. And because your state representative has pretty good pull, I have Santa there from 6 to 8 p.m. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And Santa is very willing to say hello to everyone and take a million pictures. So should you want to come by, there'll be light refreshments there as well. And I want to thank the town of Upton for partnering with me for that initiative. There's a collection box downstairs, and I greatly appreciate the partnership that we've had over the last 4 years. I'm excited about the next 2 years to continue to be your voice, and I'm looking forward to partnering in the future for anything that we can do. So with that, Mr. Chairman and the board, I'll turn it over to you.
Do you guys have any questions for the representative?
No questions, just congratulations on your win.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations. Thank you so much for coming by. It's always a privilege to have you here. So
Absolutely.
on the $1.5 million you said for the 9th district, that's total for the 3 towns?
Yes.
You mentioned about $100,000 that's coming to us, the $43,000 for safety and security, and then the 67 or so thousand for roads. What is the other bulk of that money going toward?
So for the 1.5 in total,
Yeah.
so Chapter 90 is broken down to a formula. It's based on population, road miles, employees in your district. So Grafton would have 500,000 and change, Northridge 470, Upton 313. That's from the basis of the 200 million that we did. With the additional 40 million, the breakdown's Grafton a little over 100,000, Northridge 94,000, and then Upton almost 63,000. So that's just out of that from the Chapter 90. Obviously, we're able to secure the additional earmark. And then I will say this, as I typically always do, and I know the town manager has been very receptive to any phone calls that I make, but if there's ever a grant that the town applies for, whatever the department is, whatever department head applies for it, please let me know right away. Because if I can advocate for it and we can secure it, to me, that's more local aid coming back. And where people are fighting for additional dollars, anything that we can bring back here is welcomed.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Absolutely.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Very good.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you, sir, and congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
everyone.
Thanks,
Happy
Andy.
Thanksgiving. I forgot that's next week.
It's like in 2 days?
This week.
I thought it was next week. So, I'm going to reopen the tax classification hearing. Will the assessors please come forward? So basically tonight, we are here to determine if Upton should have a single or a dual tax rate. As far as I'm always been aware, but Upton's always had a single tax rate.
Yeah.
And we're roughly made up of 95% residential, 2% commercial, 1% industrial, and 2% personal.
Okay, does anybody else need a copy of this?
Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to you.
Kelly McCallum, assessors, and
Bill Taylor, an assessor as well.
we also have Jim Earl in the audience, who's also a member of the assessors. I'd like to take this opportunity first to thank the accountant Kenny Costa and the town manager Derek with their assistance in helping us do the tax recap sheet, so we're prepared for the classification hearing tonight. Normally what we've done, I can give you some quick numbers. So if you, in order to do the recap, we usually start on page 4 and work our way forward. So if you want to go to the last page. And these were, we had 2 meetings, town meetings, for fiscal year 2019, and we raised and appropriated $22,887,867,000. So that's a key number to keep in mind, that the town meeting voters voted those amount of funds in order to raise and appropriate. So then if you go to page 3 of 4, these are the estimated receipts that we're estimating that we can collect for fiscal year 19. Thank you. So we're estimating that we would raise $1,964,836,000. So those monies, so that amount of money comes off of the $22 million that I just mentioned that was voted by the town meetings. And then page 2 is a breakdown of the appropriations that we did. That's the top half, and then the middle half is the estimated receipts that we are estimating. For example, enterprise funds, the local receipts I just quoted, free cash. So what it does is it brings us down to line 4A, that the $27,799,000 is the amount that we need to raise. We're estimating receipts of $7,463. I keep saying 7,000. I did that before. 7 million. I apologize for that. 7,463,000. I guess I should put my glasses on. And so what needs to be raised through real estate and property tax is the $20,335,626 $37. And then if you go to page 1, this talks about the valuation of the town and how we come up, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
All right, so actually, it's, what happens here is we know that we need to raise the $20,335,000, and we divide that by the value, the property and personal property and real property value. As you pointed out earlier, the bulk of that is residential. That's the $1.1 billion in residential valuation, $22 million in commercial, $10.6 million in industrial, and then $30.7 million in personal property value. But if you divide the $20,335,000 by the $1.2 billion, you come up, and I'm rounding clearly, you come up with a tax rate of $17.31 per $1,000 of value. I can't speak too much to the changes in the commercial and industrial, but an increase of 8 cents over last year, that's correct, which is roughly 1/2 of 1%. The valuation from last year in terms of residential is up about 1% overall. So for most people, well, first of all, just from looking at, if you take the average value of a home in Upton, it's roughly $420,000. It was $416,000 last year. For that particular home, with the increase in value and the small increase in the rate, you'll see a increase in the tax for that of about 1.6%, 1.5%. Unfortunately, that doesn't apply to everyone because values don't change at the same rate in terms of neighborhoods and types of homes, colonials versus
Ranches.
ranches, yes. So there's different taxpayers will see different. They'll either see a small decrease or an increase.
So we are recommending that the Board of Selectmen do because 95% of our property is residential, we don't recommend doing a dual tax rate, which is what we're here for the classification, because we don't, it wouldn't change much for the residential tax rate if we were to increase it for the commercial and personal property side.
So if you were to shift as much as you could from residential to the commercial, industrial, and personal property, it would result in a 50 cents per thousand decrease in the residential rate and I think it's $8.30 increase to the commercial rate. So you really, there's no way to shift the burden in a way that makes sense from our perspective.
I'm sure the CDC would be happy to hear that as well, right? It'd be pretty difficult to promote business in town with a
So then the last page, I think it might have been your 5th page maybe on your, it's called the LA, up at the top it says classification tax allocation. So that's where we're, you know, if you take the vote, it would be a single rate, and it shows the tax rate on it. And then on the opposite side, you will show, it shows LA 5 excess capacity is $247,839. And so, in order to move forward, we just need a vote of the Board of Selectmen, and then we can do the paperwork to get it. And keep in mind, the 1731 is a preliminary tax rate. It does need to go to the Division of Department of Revenue in order to be finalized. So it's just preliminary until they have a chance to look at everything.
Do I have a motion for a single tax rate?
I'd like to make a motion that town maintains and sticks with the historical perspective of having a single tax rate for the town.
Second the motion?
Any comment or any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, seeing none? That's unanimous action for a single tax rate.
I will just ask.
Thank you both.
I know you need to move forward, but if I could just get your signature right at the bottom and pass it down. In order for us to move forward with the paperwork tomorrow, we need that, your signature on file.
Anywhere at the bottom?
Anywhere on the bottom is
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
Glenn, is there a way to do this before? the
Next
meeting?
on our agenda, we have Mr. Thomas Valera from the Historic Commission, or Historic Society, sorry. What are we saying?
She said
I thought it's not acceptable.
the value of the town went up as well, right from the 1174.
Thomas Bayer from the Upton Historical Society. I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen and the town manager for allocating some time that I can give you a review of the Historical Society's activities and assets. There are some copies of my presentation here on the table.
Half your presentation?
No, I didn't get it. I didn't know there was one.
Originally, the town of Upton had a historical society back in the 1800s, and it operated for a number of years, but then eventually it was disbanded for lack of support. But a lot of the items that they had collected at that time were not held by the town, and they got dispersed to private owners. In 1973, the current Historical Society was incorporated and currently is a 501(c) nonprofit company. In the early or late 70s, early 80s, during that time period, the Historical Society worked very closely with the Historical Commission. At that time, the commission was collecting artifacts and items of history, but at some point in that time period, the Historical Commission decided to turn over the care of all the historical documents and artifacts and so forth to the Historical Society for maintenance and preservation. The current society has about 163 members scattered across 6 states. And besides the town providing us space in the Ristine building, we have income from sales of souvenir items, donations, membership fees, and fundraising activities. Our budget runs about $3,000 a year. In the Ristine building on the 2nd floor, we have our museum and office space, which is along the Main Street side of the room. In the front, and towards the Grove Street side, there is a room called the Fay Room, which is a collection of historic books, documents, genealogies, and vital statistics. That material was originally in the care of the town library, and a few years back, the library turned the care of it over to the Historical Society as well. In a room next to that, the Society has a storage for scrapbooks, journals, documents, and other types of books, as well as in a closet there, a vintage clothing collection. On the 3rd floor, there's 2 storerooms that we use. One on the Main Street side is the main storeroom, and we have our larger collection of artifacts there with some documents and journals. In the 2nd storeroom, we have all of our framed items, things that come in frames that need special racks to store them. So some of the framed items are 3-4 feet in size, and so we have those stored there in racks. In addition, the Society owns the boot shop at the corner of Chestnut Street and Mendon Street. That was deeded to the Historical Society quite a few years back. We maintain the building, we've kept repairs on it, repaired the roof and so forth, but it's mainly just visual and kind of preservation. We do store some large items in there that we can't store anywhere else. Our collection includes about 10,000 photographs, 5 file cabinets of documents, 800 books, scrapbooks and journals, vintage clothing, hats, and over 1,200 artifacts, including many items donated by town departments, documents and ledgers and so forth that the departments no longer needed because of their age. They'd turn it over to the Historical Society. And you can see here some items from the cemeteries, and we have some history of the police and fire departments. And in addition, we have some records accumulated by Fisher Taft, and he kept a journal of births, deaths, and marriages and fires in Upton from 1728 to 1812. So we have some very old documentation there. We have the town reports from in the 1880s up through the present. And we have assessors' reports, maps, deeds, and so forth. Particularly, we have copies of the deeds in the Hopkinton section of town. Worcester County, you can access all the deeds on the county website, but Hopkinton section is in Middlesex County, and they haven't put theirs on the web yet. So if you need deed information for the Hopkinton section of town, we have copies of all those deeds. We have reports of from the schools, the overseers of the poor, weights and measures, maps of early roads, history of the fire, police, churches, businesses, organizations, families, railroads, and so forth. We have Upton directories, or business directories, from 1898 and 1907. General history that's available for sale to the public. We have a series of books. This is the Upton, history of Upton from 1735 to 1935. This was written for the 200th anniversary of the town. And the society had these books for sale, and we sold out our stock. So with the resources in our museum and in our offices, we completely redid this whole book. It looks like the original, but we digitized the whole thing, laid it all out to look just like the original, designed the cover, and sent it to a printer. And so we now have a new supply of those available. Another book that's available is Upton's Heritage, and that book was published for the 250th anniversary, and we have these for sale. The Society designed this book, The Pictorial History, and we have these for sale. This book was all put together by a committee in the Historical Society, and Graphic Word Publications, which is run by the Holmans, did the publishing of this and had it printed. More recently, John Robertson wrote this book, Old Upton Road, and it's about two men from Upton who served in the Civil War, and he researched this and had it published, but he turned over the copies to the Historical Society to sell, with the agreement that half the proceeds from the sale get turned over to the Historical Commission. So periodically, usually at least once a year, we look at what we sold and we write a check to the commission for half of the proceeds. This book, A Journey Through Upton Memories, was compiled, I should say, by a team led by Barbara Burke. We went through a lot of historical stories about the town, and Barbara picked out which ones, and she wanted in the book. And the committee went and digitized everything, located photographs to go with the articles, laid out the whole book, wrote the index, had it all ready for printing, designed the cover, Bill did the cover work, and we sent it off to a printer in Ohio and had it printed. So we did essentially the whole publishing job on that book. Maintenance of the collection. In 2002, we obtained our first computers, and we got software for managing museum collections. So since 2002, the last 16 years, all the material that gets donated to us gets recorded in the database. We have accurate descriptions of who donated it, when they donated it, what it is, and any history about the item. All the records prior to that were written in journals, and they weren't terribly detailed. But we've taken what information we have, and we put that into the museum database as well. All of the 8,000 photographs that we have in albums, and if you're in the museum, you can see 2.5 rows of blue folders, blue albums on the shelf, over 8,000 photographs. Those have all been digitized and indexed. We have over 140 scrapbooks of newspaper articles. All of those have been indexed. So if you're looking for information about anything, you can search the index, go to the scrapbook, and find information that might be 10 years old or it might be 50 years old. So there's a lot of reference material there. A lot of the photographs that are in frames have also been digitized as well. The town reports from 1900, my sheet here says to 1940, but I think it goes to 1945. We've digitized all those town reports, and they're in PDF searchable format. So if you want to look up anything in the town reports from that time period, you can come over there and you can run a search, and it'll go back through the town reports and find any references that you might be looking for. We hope to be able to extend that into more recent years, but it just takes time to go through the process to do it. Currently, we're in the process of inventorying all of the documents and journals and so forth that we haven't picked up already and got into the database. Some of the support and activities that we provide, we're certainly the Upton's primary repository of the history of the town. The Society was the source for the digital files of all the historic photographs that you see posted in the town. I worked through Sandy and the man who did the work from Worcester, and he came over and went through all of our files, all the stuff that was digitized, he picked out, and we chose what to use. The cabinet of weights and measures that you see in the lower floor, that was completely refurbished by us. Originally, it was located back in that corner of this floor. It was all spattered with paint and in a very beat up condition. We also set up the display of hats that's in the lower entryway. When the town was doing the 275th anniversary, the Historical Society organized all the displays that were in the town hall, which was the society, all the town departments, and a lot of the organizations. We got them all to come set up displays in the town hall. We donated $1,000 to the town when they needed to refurbish the shelving and so forth in the town safe. We also donated $300 towards the preservation of documents related to the CCC camp on Westboro Road. We've also refurbished a brass chandelier that was in the main hall downstairs. That was scheduled to go in the trash. That was offered to me. I got it all refurbished, rewired and everything, and it's downstairs if somebody wants to install it. I think it would be a nice, it blends with the lighting that you have, but it's one of the originals. On the third grade Government and History Day, we sponsor three different sites for the children to visit. So there's usually over 90 students each year coming through our museum and listening to our presentations. The Heritage Day event every fall is organized and run by the Historical Society. And again, all the town organizations and town departments get free booth space. You know, we only charge commercial vendors. I mentioned about the Journey Through Upton Memories was published by the Society, and we support the town and the public on researching any material on any subject that they'd be interested in. So our mission is to preserve the history of the town, serve the town administration and the public, and we sincerely hope that the town will take into consideration our needs whenever they're doing the plans for the redevelopment of Upton Center. I thank you very much.
Any questions?
Just one quick question. We have quite a few people in attendance. When are you actually open?
We are open
To the public?
We are open Tuesday mornings, Wednesday mornings, Thursday mornings, and Saturday mornings. So sometimes, you know, having enough people to staff it, we usually have enough to cover it, but sometimes we don't, and we might miss a day here or there, but those are the basic days that we're open.
Okay.
And we invite you to come over. There's a quick tour here. If Glenn can put the slides back on, I'll just walk through this for a second. These 3 photographs are of the museum on the 2nd floor. This is the Fay Room of historic books, and the center, top center is the general, and the bottom shows 3 bookcases loaded with books and town reports and so forth, along with some of our hat collection there on the top. Next to that was the room that I mentioned, has books and scrapbooks and journals, and we have a number of bookcases in there storing all of that material. All of the scrapbooks have been put in archival safe boxes on the left-hand side in that photograph. This is a vintage clothing room. It's very small and material is squeezed in there, but again, everything is well boxed and preserved. The attic storeroom, this is the main room facing Main Street. Shows some of the material that we have there, and currently we're going through that to sort things out. And the second storeroom in the attic where we have the framed photographs and paintings and so forth. So if you'd like a personal tour, let me know anytime or stop over.
Mr. Bear, thank you very much for all of your service. The Society provides a wonderful and critical service to the town. Your stewardship is greatly appreciated. It's a lot of work by a lot of volunteers, I'm sure of that. Do you happen to know the horse trough off of Elm Street at the end of Kiwanis Beach, what the latest disposition of that is?
I do not know what the latest disposition. I know somewhat about the history. At one point in time, the family offered to deed it over to the Historical Society, but the condition was that we do not move it. They were afraid of breakage. We felt that, you know, if they ever sold the property, that whoever bought the property, we would have no control over it sitting on somebody else's property. So we turned the offer down. Personally, you know, it got moved there from the town common right out front. Back when they didn't have the equipment we have today, and I would think that you could move it. I'd like to see it back in Heritage Park, and I think you could do that with a forklift and some careful work, if we could get the family to consider that.
I think Mrs. Desjardins knows.
I'm Donna Desjardins on the Historical Commission.
Yes.
We have been discussing that and we've made an attempt to get in touch with the family, but we're on that we talked about moving it to the Heritage Park. And that would be a short distance from the house there to Heritage Park, and, you know, perhaps we could get support from the DPW to make that move with a little forklift. So that's under consideration.
We're getting a nod from Mr. Westgate, the director of the DPW. So that's great. That would be a great asset to bring back into the town and make sure it's preserved with the town history. So wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Thank you for such a detailed presentation. Okay. We're going to postpone the town manager's report till next meeting since Derek was away on vacation for the week. Mr. Westgate, would you please come forward for the next... The next 5 or 6 articles pertain to the DPW. But before you get started, I'd like to congratulate you on your recent certification. Mr. Westgate just received his Massachusetts Certified Public Purchasing Official certification, which is multiple tests and multiple weeks worth of training. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I had the opportunity to take the classes at late fall, several months, 3 different exams for MCPPO, which covers Chapter 149, which is vertical construction like buildings, 3039M, which is horizontal construction like public works, bridges, and roads, 30B, which is goods and services, and 25, which is all of our energies and utilities. It was very exciting, and I'm very happy I passed.
Congratulations. That's great. Thank you for doing
Thank
that.
you.
Very good.
So item 6.1 is discussion of a traffic study and signage on South Street at Oak Street. This was a request by the citizen at 134 Chestnut Street for a 3-way stop. Basically, I think what you're asking for is a motion for the Board of Selectmen to authorize a study under the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Streets and Highways Federal Highway Administration 2003, Edition 23, CFR 655, 603, MGL C, Chapter 85, Section 2. So I believe you're asking for.
Very good, Mr. Chairman. Glad I didn't have to say it. A brief history. So here in Upton, every town has their own process that they go through. In this particular town, you are the road commissioners, so you have the final say on making recommendations for signage. However, we do have to follow rules and regulations, and under Mass General laws, you're allowed to put up a stop sign through your own authority, but anytime you add more than one stop sign to an intersection, it requires that a traffic engineer do an assessment on the intersection. I don't want to give the wrong impression that this is a major study where we have to put a town article on the floor for $10,000 or $20,000. This is relatively simple, relatively inexpensive, and the DPW budget can accommodate the expense. If you're familiar with South Street and Chestnut, South Street and Chestnut already has a stop sign at it. South Street is a throughway that takes a very hard right, depending on where you're going. It can be a hard left. And it almost appears to be as though you're taking a turn. It can be confusing if you're not familiar with the area. I can see where residents are concerned about accidents. I have spoken with the police chief, and we have had accidents there in the past. And that's why I'm recommending that we have a study done.
Is this the second request for the same intersection? I think we just,
We had two requests.
This is the study. There were two people that requested, two different people that had asked about
But I thought we
having
already-
stop signs set
I
up.
thought we already approved the study once.
No, at the last meeting, the board tabled it for
Yeah.
further discussion, but to Selectman
We didn't know the
Simons' point,
process.
there have been two residents who have requested this.
So we just need a
I think the
motion.
last time it came up, I actually live in that neighborhood, not too far, I drive through that intersection all the time. I'll tell you, I'm used to it, and most all of the residents are. I don't like it myself. I mean, I think it's fine. I'm not in favor of a three-way stop there myself. There's a three-way stop at Misco in Spring, what Misco
Yes.
Drive is in Spring. There's a stop on Shore Drive, there's a stop on Groves, Goss Pond Road. So myself, I feel it's kind of redundant. I really don't think there needs to be a three-way stop there myself. I know there's been requests for it, but that would put two three-way stop signs less than an eighth of a mile apart and a very light traffic through there, so I don't think it's necessary myself, but it's up to you, gentlemen.
I would defer to the experts, the DPW director as well as the police chief, from a safety perspective, what they think is the most reasonable approach. I don't know anything about traffic engineering.
Yeah, and I think we gotta look at the liability too, so.
And through the chair, if I may, well, the good thing is that the traffic engineer may look at it, Steve, and he might actually agree with you and say that. Because there are instances, the reason why we have this study done, the reason why he assesses the intersection, there are instances where you can create a more dangerous intersection by adding additional stop signs. So it may not be warranted at all. But it's reasonably inexpensive, and it won't take long to get the study done.
Do we, Dennis, have you had a chance to do some research to determine whether or not, I know you've only been here less than a year, if there's been a study that predates your arrival?
I'm not aware of one.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the conducting of a traffic study at the intersection of South and Oak Streets.
Second motion?
That's unanimous action?
I do have one more quick question for you about how long does it take?
Oh, I don't think it'll take more than a couple of weeks, and I'll bring the results back to the board. And then you can certainly deliberate on the findings and decide for yourself whether or not you want to go forward.
So the next agenda item is to discuss the plowing of the private driveways, or not driveways, roadways. It's all you, Mr. Westgate.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, a learning curve for myself as well. Here in Upton, we have not a lot of, I'm going to call them private roads, but we really shouldn't. We're going to call them unaccepted roads. They're not town-accepted roads. Some years back, your predecessors had put together a series of public hearings to discuss in great detail, in depth, all of the unaccepted roads in town. And through their deliberations had put together a list, I would imagine with some input from your public safety officials, and had determined that the list you have before you now that you see, the grayed out areas, the shaded out areas are roads that are not considered on an annual basis for snow and ice services from Public Works Department, and the ones in white are considered on an annual basis. Through the policy that the board had established previously, the Public Works Director is supposed to publish by July 31st a list of the streets that are in need of any repair within those white roads. For instance, there were 2 this year. Breton Road and Shore Road needed some potholes taken care of and some brushback. However, my highway manager was very familiar with this process and had done it for many years. So John had worked closely with the residents, and he knew the residents on these streets, and he was able to rectify the situation. So we were a little late in getting our posting up, but we were able to post on the town's website that all of the streets that are typically serviced for snow and ice by the Department of Public Works will be serviced this winter season. Next year, I will have that for you for the 31st, and then if there are any roads in question, they have until October 15th to bring those roads up to the standards that are listed in the policy.
Just one curiosity, where is Wagon Wheel Road? No, I don't know.
I do.
Where?
I'm drawing a blank.
I'm drawing a blank myself.
Christian Hill, Prospect Street.
Oh, that short section of road.
And obviously, Kiwanis is now a town-accepted road. So that'll be taken off the list for next year.
Do you make a motion on this one, or you just? Can you make a motion to authorize the DPW to plow the right of way?
Just a question, I'm going to ask you about Old 140, that street there. What's the latest with that?
I don't have a response back from the state, and I don't think I'm going to get one in the time frame that I was hoping for. So if you're, are we regarding the road or the tree?
The road.
The road, it's on our list as, if you look at the town's pavement management plan, when Bader came and did a study on all of our streets, we have town-accepted, unaccepted, private, and we have ones that have no determination whatsoever. These are roads that are usually discontinued. They were once county streets, and they were paper roads, and no one took ownership of them.
Right, this is the one that used to be, so for people that don't know, this is across from William Street. There's a road in there that's used to be part of 140 that the state used to maintain, and then they rerouted 140 to straighten it out a little bit. So there's two or three houses that live on this road. Three houses that they don't get plowed, but nobody owns the street. It's not a town street, it's not a state street, it's not,
Correct.
they certainly don't own it, but it doesn't get plowed, so.
Ownership, I'm not clear who does own it. I can tell you that the town does not. It's
Right.
not a town-accepted road.
Right.
But I couldn't tell you if the state owns it or if ownership.
GIS says the state owns it, but I don't know if GIS is up to date or not.
Right. I have a phone call into District 3 asking for clarification on it. I don't have a lot of faith that I'll get it.
So if they say they own it, they would be responsible for plowing it?
Correct. It's listed here in our shaded area, which means it was considered in the past and vetted, and it's not one that we consider it on an annual basis. Keep in mind that the board, as we go forward, the board can decide that it wants to go through this process again and consider these roads again at any time. It's your policy.
I wonder when the state rerouted Route 140, did they discontinue that section of road?
That's my hunch.
And then nobody picked it up.
Right.
And the town used to pave it for a long time, for years and years and years and years. The town just did it, but then this policy got implemented and they stopped plowing it. So I've gotten complaints from people that live on that road, like, we don't own the road, but we're in the
But
town.
the policy, I think, got enacted in 06 or 07, wasn't
There's 3 houses on there.
it? So how many,
It hasn't
Isn't
been
it?
enacted that long, it's been like maybe 4
I
years.
think it was 2014.
we're looking at 6 now. So they haven't been plowed in 4 years? Who's been plowing, the residents, or has the town just been?
I think they have to pay to plow it.
Yeah,
They have to pay a
there has
contractor
been
to
a
plow.
resident, the furthest house up has been taking care of it for years. I don't know that they can still do that, which is probably the case of a lot of these shaded areas, these shaded streets that we don't consider. They still get serviced by someone. It's just, it's not the town.
Are you able to send somebody out to assess the road to see if it's plowable for us? The condition,
I could take a look at it.
let us know.
I'm familiar with the road. I've been up there. I didn't really take a hard look at it. It's just a sub-base. It's not an actual paved road. Looks like it was like regrinds that were laid down at one time.
So I don't know, I'd like to get that road plowed, because there's people complaining about it, so, but I'm sure other people will other people will want to ask questions about this too, so we would owe that to everybody.
We have to let him vet it before we.
Yeah, that's fine.
Probably inspect the road or whatever else needs to be done,
Yeah,
so.
that's fine.
You able to vet it for us and let us know?
Yes, sir.
So should we approve this with the exception of that, or I don't want him to have to come back?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
prove it with, if he vets it.
Yeah, okay.
At his discretion, probably.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll make a motion to approve the plowing of private ways for the winter of 2018, 2019.
To include Old State Road 40 if vetted by, or you do them all.
At the
Yep.
discretion of the DPW director.
Perfect. I second that.
Unanimous action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's go moving on. Next we have from you is to authorize the town manager to execute various contracts for salt and liquid de-icing.
Yes, sir. So, through the chair, these are cooperative bids that we did with several other towns. We've been doing them for many years. And so Morton Salt was the successful, low eligible bidder, with Champion Salt as a secondary. Most towns do primaries and secondaries now, just in case we have a terrible winter and we get backed up and we have difficulty receiving salt. And the same thing for our liquid de-icing materials. And I'm happy to say that our primary salt bid is about $1 lower than last year.
So how many tons of salt do you keep on stock?
In stock,
Yeah. Do we know roughly?
I think the shed holds about,
The shed was 2,500, but I don't remember if that was yards or tons.
no, it holds more than that. I want to say it's 10,000 yards. I think each bay is 1,000 yards, is 10 bays, which is actually not an awful lot of, I mean, in a real bad snow and ice storm, we can go right through half that shed in one storm.
Dollar less is good.
Yes. Happy with that myself.
Do we use a lot of de-icer or?
We don't.
Yeah.
We have a 1,000-gallon tank. We use a couple thousand gallons a year. And only in certain applications, if we're going to have temperatures that are going to be below 15 degrees and they're falling, and the salt is going to become inactive, then we'll use liquid calcium chloride to help lower the melting temperature so that our salt stays effective.
Okay.
Any questions, Steve?
I have none.
Oh, I'm good.
So we make a motion to authorize the town manager.
I make a motion to authorize the town manager to execute the contracts with Morton Salt as the salt supplier and Innovative Municipal Products for the de-icing product.
You wanted all four, right?
Yes, I need all.
Oh, you want all four of them, sorry. Okay, so for all four of these. I thought you were just showing the high and the low.
Second the motion,
We had to add, hold on, we had to add Champion Salt
Yeah, so,
to also include Champion Salt,
and Safe Road Services.
and to also include Safe Road Services.
why do we need two?
So for explanation purposes, this is not the high and the low. These are the two lowest bidders. There was 6 or 8 salt bidders and 8 or 10 liquid. But we do a primary and a secondary. There are times when we cannot get, because the demand is so high from all of the towns collectively, that the one supplier falls short, and that's why we do an alternate bid.
Okay, sorry, I understand, got it, thank you. Great, so I second Steve's motion. That includes all these
Okay. Unanimous action.
contracts.
You got it, Tim?
Steve's motion.
All four.
You got it, all four of them, there we go.
Combo motion.
Started with you.
We're so good at
You
this.
got some papers for us? I got my town manager. Thank you, Mr. Westby.
Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Hopefully it's,
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Do we have anybody from Medcomet Land Trust here tonight?
Hi.
Will you guys just introduce yourselves to the record.
Sure, I'm Lisa Melzinski, the president of Metacomet Land Trust. Good
Hi,
evening.
Lisa.
I'm Mike Penko, a member of the board of directors.
Tom Vick, Blackstone, a member of the board also.
And I guess you're here to talk tonight, or it says we're looking for a motion to approve the Heritage Park conservation restrictions, so we're just turn it over to you, and you could give us your presentation.
So Mike's going to speak for us.
Yeah, I can just briefly talk about it and then answer any questions if the board has. Thank you for taking some time to talk about it, though, with us. Well, Metacomet Land Trust is a regional land trust. We represent 15 different towns, including Upton. We own some property, and we also hold conservation restrictions on other properties. Heritage Park was acquired by the town using Community Preservation Act funds in 2006. And when Community Preservation Act funds are used to purchase land, the Community Preservation Act requires that a conservation restriction be placed on the property to protect it in perpetuity. The Metacomet board has agreed to hold the conservation restriction. The town cannot hold a conservation restriction on property that it owns, so you need an external entity to hold the restriction, and Metacomet's agreed to do that. The CR that you had in your packet, it follows a model established by the state, and the model CR is tailored for each different project, each different property. It's been, in this particular CR, it's been reviewed by the state, by Metacomet, town manager, town council, historical commission in town, and we feel that it's close to being a final draft. If the Board of Selectmen were to approve it in its present form, the conservation restriction would go back to the state for one more final review, and then if it's okay with them, they would send us back a copy which would be signed by the Board of Selectmen, the Metacomet president, Lisa, and then finally by the Secretary of the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. And then it would be recorded with the Registry of Deeds.
Just out of curiosity, if this happened in 2006, why is it 12 years
Why
later?
has it taken so long? It's a good question. The original, I believe the original draft that Metacomet prepared for the town, and it's changed quite a bit since then, it was around 2013. And then there were several reasons. One, there were various discussions about how to make sure that the chamber, the Upton Chamber, which is on the Heritage Park property, is preserved. Tribal entities got involved. The State Historic Preservation Commission got involved. So there were a lot of players initially. And then the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs has one person who reviews all the conservation restrictions in the state, and that person retired. And then they had a
lot of turnover.
a temporary person, and this conservation restriction very quickly went like to the bottom of the pile. And then it took them quite a while to hire another person. That person worked for a while and then moved to a different position. We had a switch in town managers, and finally, a few months ago, we asked Derek to re-energize this and finally get it over the goal line, basically.
But the state also hired someone who's been there for more than 3 months, so he's got things very much back on schedule.
Brett or Steve, do you have any questions?
I do. I read the restriction, and I see that it gives passive recreation, walking, fishing, natural observation, but I don't see anything pro or con regarding hunting. And where it's a fairly good-sized parcel, I would like to see that hunting is included in its uses.
If the town would like to do that, that's fine. I'm not sure very much the property would meet the setback requirements for hunting.
The total
It's fair.
acreage is?
It's about 8 acres.
About 8 acres.
It's about 8 acres.
A lot of it is open.
Yes. Yeah, there's some wooded, but there's a lot of meadow
Yeah.
areas maintained by the DPW. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, I mean, Metacom does not, advocate, and Lisa's step in, but I don't think we've ever advocated for restricting hunting on any property. I think the reason it's not in there is just that we didn't really think it was a likely activity, given the size of the property and the proximity of,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think with all the state forests, like, we have a heck of a lot more hunting in this town than most people have. This is a really small parcel.
I was thinking either.
But I'm not a hunter, so.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking even so much as for the primitive arms, archers, black powder, things of that nature, where there's water there, you know, it butts up to the pond there. I just thought it would be nice to have that included. Naturally, all the state laws would apply. That would be my thought.
I like so while we ponder that, just for folks in the audience, so the land use goal of this conservation restriction, this is for Heritage Park, which is sort of in the Kiwanis Beach area, is to maintain and enhance Upton's rural small town character and limit commercial, industrial, and residential growth to what is appropriate to Upton's character and supportable by available infrastructure while being environmentally responsible. So that's the goal of the conservation restriction we're talking about.
It's not actually near Kiwanis Beach. It's on Elm Street,
Yeah,
so it would be
It's a hint.
half mile away.
before Kiwanis Beach Road, yeah. Well, what's a big town? I'd say that's relatively close.
It's a stone's throw away.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, the only thing about the hunting is you worry about if it's a park, you don't want the kids, you know, it's nothing I worry about, but.
Do you have a question in the audience?
Couldn't the town put no hunting restrictions on that, independent of the conservation use?
We're not
He
looking
wants to put a hunting allowance on it.
Yeah, oh, allow it, yeah.
He wants to allow hunting.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to the previous speakers, there's a gate up there. Place is closed from November 1st to April 1st, so nobody's supposed to be in there.
Except hunters.
Go ahead, Mr.
Just a quick question. If we've got a land stewardship committee and things like that, would they be an appropriate party to manage that instead of releasing control to an entity outside of the town of Upton?
Sounds like the town can't control it. It sounds like it has to be a private or a
You
third
can't
party.
hold the deed restriction, but you manage the land.
Metacom would not manage the property.
So you're just,
You know, the property is, I think it's currently being managed by the Historical Commissioners.
And for the record, Mike is on the Land Stewardship Committee.
Yes, and matter of fact, Land Stewardship has partnered with the Historical Commission to do some management on the property in the past.
Right, so the town continues to own the property. Metacomet just makes sure that the conservation restriction is adhered to, but the management continues to be the town's as well.
Mrs. Desjardins, did you?
Donna Desjardins, hysterical. That we discussed the CR at some length
Yeah.
and purposely left hunting out of it. That we did not feel that that was the appropriate use in any form for that piece of land.
Is legal gone through this and everything, Derek?
Yes, yep. Katie Klein from KP has reviewed it. Yep.
So I make a motion to approve the Heritage Park conservation restriction as written.
Second motion?
Is that unanimous action? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great work. Thanks for taking care of the property.
They're not gonna be managing it. They just hold.
See, we still gotta foot the bill.
Yeah, they just.
I was talking to Mike.
Oh, there goes Steve.
Oh, no, I was talking to Mike. They're the ones that take care of the property.
They just
How do
kind
you
of hold.
pronounce his last name?
Oh, Mike.
No, Patua?
Oh, I don't know her. That's Pathau, maybe?
Is there anybody from 147 North Street here? Either Robert or Michelle, and I'm gonna butcher the last name. Pataho?
No, I'm here, it's the request of the Land Stewardship Committee
Mind
that,
introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, Bill Taylor, I'm a member of the Land Stewardship Committee.
Thank you, sir.
And in this case here, The town holds an easement on the property owned by Mr. and Mrs. Pateau for parking and trail associated with the Whitney Conservation Area, or what was formerly known as Sweet William Farm. The Land Stewardship Committee has been putting up kiosks on all of the property that is actually owned by the town, all of the conservation property and open space property. And we got to this property, and in connection with, putting this sign up, we took a look at the easement agreement, and it says that we're permitted to do, put up signs, but we have to adhere to all the laws and bylaws. And that led to a little bit closer examination of the town's sign bylaw, which, as it turns out, all signs on town-owned property require the authorization of the Board of Selectmen. So in any case, I'm making a specific request to put up a sign on the easement at this property. And then after we do that, I'd like to talk about the other signs we've put up already. But I do have, I have a copy of the type of kiosk we would like to put up. And here, this shows the location, but it's at the, if you're familiar with that property and the parking area, it's at the south east corner of the property, southwest corner, excuse me. Basically, it'll be right near North Street in the parking area, so that people who come to walk the trails will be able to refer to the sign, which will have a trail map on it, to determine where they want to go and what to expect.
Is that on the side of the road with the houses or across the street?
It's on the side of the road with the house.
With the houses, okay.
And actually, one of the things that we'll also include in this particular kiosk on the display, in the display area, is instructions to the effect that, the house is private property and you shouldn't, interfere with the owners there.
I don't have any questions for Mr. Taylor. You? Brett?
Have you talked to the landowners? What's their perspective on having the sign placed?
The landowners at this point have agreed that what we want to install is acceptable to them.
Great.
Any follow-ups?
Nope, that's my
Questions?
question.
Pretty straightforward.
Take a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the signage at 147 North Street, the kiosk.
Second that motion.
Unanimous action.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Taylor.
I just wanted also to discuss with you a little bit. We have installed kiosks on other town-owned property that's managed by the Conservation Commission and the Land Stewardship Committee as well. We did come to the board, I think it was at the end of 2015, to describe what we intended to do, which is exactly what we've done, but at the time, we weren't aware that we needed to get specific authorization to put up signs on town-owned property like this. So we sort of got a tacit approval, but not an explicit approval. And the Stewardship Committee could provide a list of all of the stuff that we've done so far if you wanted to close the loop on that. But I just wanted to let you know that we're aware that, based upon the way the sign bylaw is currently written, we believe that we need to get your authorization to put these signs up, which we will do, but we did do a bunch of them with your, not your explicit approval, but your tacit approval.
If you just give us a list, we can throw it on the agenda for next meeting.
All right, I appreciate that.
Great work, thank you.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have an appointment for the Technology Committee. Is Brad Phillips here? Good evening, sir. Brad, I see you gave us an application to join the town's Technology Committee. Looking at your background, seems like you have an extensive background in training in IT and technology. So just introduce yourself to the board.
Sure. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brindisi, Town Manager. My name is Brad Phillips. I grew up in Upton. Recently moved back with my wife and her new baby. I'm just looking to get involved in the town, and at the suggestion of Mr. Brindisi, the Technology Committee, I attended a meeting, and it seemed like something where I'd be able to help in some of my expertise over the years. And
We could use.
Thank you for the opportunity to serve the community.
Yeah.
We had a tech
Openings on
problem
the
in
committee,
town hall
right?
today.
Yeah,
Big
yeah,
problem.
exactly.
Sandy, we have openings on the committee and everything? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You want someone to make a motion?
Yep,
Glad to have your service, actually. Nice of you to volunteer.
very nice of you to volunteer and step up. We need all the help we can get, so thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Got it. I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Brad Phyllis to the Technology Committee.
Second the motion.
That's unanimous action, and thank you, sir, and look forward to.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Very much. Look forward to working together.
All that for that. Let's see. Motion 6.7 is to approve the renewal of liquor licenses. This is a two-step process where the retail stores give their application to the town of Upton. The town of Upton vets them and then notifies the ABC. Are all the applications complete?
Yes.
And all the insurances and taxes paid up? Somebody want to make a motion for all the stores?
You have all of them down?
Yeah, it's these 7.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we renew the liquor licenses for the following: Country Club Super, Haney Inc., which is Colonial Liquors, Kelts Inc., which is Rose Garden, R.A. Perkins Inc., which is Liquors Plus, Nabuck Rod and Gun Club, the Red Rock Bar and Grill, and the 118
Kitchen and Spirits.
Kitchen and Spirits.
Second that motion.
That's unanimous action. Let's see. Let's see. Mike, you want to come forward? Sure. Just introduce yourself, please.
Sure, my name is Michael Mary. I'm the owner of 118 Main Street Kitchen and Spirits.
He's looking for us for permission to extend his liquor license on New Year's Eve until 1 o'clock on January 1st. So just formality that we go through. So.
Sure.
You don't have certified bartender and all that?
Yep.
It's going to be the same guy, Brian?
Same guy, yep.
We all know.
Been there before?
He's very talkative.
Supporting local business is important.
Any questions from the board?
I have none.
Nope, sounds good.
They don't have any questions, so somebody wants to make a motion?
I make a motion to extend the hours to serve alcohol for 118 Main Street Kitchen and Spirits on December 31st, 2018.
January 1st.
That'd be 2009.
No,
December 31st.
I'm sorry. Second motion.
Unanimous action. And what time do you plan on
Application.
closing?
I wouldn't put us past us to get it wrong.
Depends on the crowd.
Yeah.
Just have to have the flexibility.
Sounds good, sir.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks for the tomahawk steaks.
Yeah.
Item 6.9 and 6.91 and 6.92 are two disclosure of non-elected municipal employees. The first one is for Bill McCormick, who is a volunteer on the Economic Development Committee, and he's also a local real estate agent in town. He's disclosing he could have financial interest or gains by representing either a town or a citizen during some type of projects going on in town.
You'd like some comment?
If you'd like to say something, Mr.
Elaborate
McCormick.
just a little.
Yes. So we don't have any plans as a town yet to acquire a parcel that I have listed. But in the event that the town would do that, that's why I filed that disclosure.
You just excuse yourself from the votes if you listed it?
Absolutely. Yep.
Any questions?
Nope, and I would offer that if anyone else has questions about any of this, to ask them now.
Any questions?
That's what we're here for.
I don't.
Okay, this is, it's just, we just have to accept it, we don't have to vote on this.
Just accept
We're just accepting this. So. Okay, Mr. McCormick, thank you.
Thank you for submitting the disclosure.
And the next one is Mrs. Haggerty. Mrs. Haggerty is disclosing that she is on the Cultural Council, which receives grants and reviews grants. Under her authority, under the guidelines of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the venue must comply. Oh, let me start over. I'm skipping around. So Mrs. Haggerty is on the Cultural Council Committee, which will be reviewing and voting on grants and applications submitted. The Recreation Commission has submitted an application for funding a concert as well as a perform an additional concert. Under the guidelines of the Mass Council, the venue must comply with the ADA compliance. You are disclosing that as a resident of the town, you have filed a complaint with the Department of Justice Interior. It's docket number PCR 16-91 on ADA stuff against the town. You're just disclosing the conflict.
I am.
Hopefully I explained that right.
Do you have any questions? I'm good.
Any questions for Mr. Haggerty?
Can you explain it to me in English? I know you read it verbatim and I didn't understand it. I
Lynn
wrote that.
Haggerty, Cider Mill Lane, Cultural Council. I'm basically disclosing that I'm part of the Cultural Council, and under their guidelines, the venues must be accessible and follow under the American with Disabilities Act, and that's what I'm disclosing that I have filed in prior years. There's still open cases from 2016 of cases I filed with Department of Justice. Recreation is under the Department of the Interior. So I'm just disclosing that. Is that?
Are those cases against the town? Or what's the description or the way to characterize those?
I mean, the only open cases we
complaints,
have right now with the Architectural Access Board for the 3 complaints that were filed at the Kiwanis Beach Recreation Area.
Okay, but that's against the town, or targeting the town.
Right.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Great, thanks.
I just want to say it's not, I beg to differ about targeting the town.
Yeah, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm just trying to make sure that
Well,
it's not
I
something
just-
outside of Upton. This isn't like a state thing. This is just, I don't want people to misunderstand, right? So these are opportunities within the town to make properties compliant that Ms. Haggerty is advocating for, and she's going to continue to advocate for that being part of the Cultural Development Committee.
Under the council, yeah, I'm going to continue to advocate,
Yeah.
but I'm also going to follow the guidelines
Yeah.
set forth in the Cultural Council, and the guidelines are different venues accessible.
Good.
That's what I'm going to do.
Thank you for
Okay,
doing that.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 6.10 is the discussion of a master plan committee. There's been a lot of discussion over the past few months about the development of a master plan committee. The last master plan for the town of Upton, it was updated in 2005. When it was updated in 2005, it was made up of 5 citizens, Daler Consulting Group, and a planner from CMRPC. Take this opportunity to open up to the board for their discussion.
Yeah, so I am a huge advocate of us updating our master plan. Personally, I don't think the time is right now. I think that if we've got a RecCom master plan that's being developed, we've got an economic development committee that's working on a downtown revitalization plan. That's part of what the next item on the agenda is. We also have, there was another one, Derek, is it the council on?
The Affordable Housing Trust has mentioned a housing production plan.
A housing production plan from the Affordable Housing Trust. So these are all inputs to a master plan. So I think we've got a lot going on as a town with doing some of this revitalization. So I would propose that we leave this until maybe the spring when we sort of can get some traction on some of the specific projects we're trying to do, and then step back. We'll have those inputs to an overall master plan completed. We'll have made some progress on the downtown revitalization, and then we can sort of take a breath and let people come back and look at an overall master plan for the entire community.
Yeah, I agree. I'd definitely be in favor of pushing this off till the spring.
Okay.
I think we've got an awful lot going on right
Yeah.
now.
I think we have a lot of committees out there. I think we need to get rid of some before we.
We only have so many people to help us. Or to help the town. Yep, okay.
So we'll just put this as a future agenda item.
Future agenda item.
Okay. Item 6.11 is the discussion of the downtown revitalization plan. After last week's meeting, it's been pretty brought to all our attentions throughout the community is that there's still a lot of unanswered questions regarding what's the overall plan of the whole downtown area, especially with the Steen Building, Holy Angels. So tonight we invited Bill Bill McCormick from the Economic Development Committee forward. We're going to discuss some stuff with him. I think as a board, we need to determine where we go from here. We didn't do a good job explaining anything at the last meeting. I'll take the blame for that. But we need to get some additional deadlines. We need to get plans, and we've got to figure out where we're going to go from here.
Yeah. And so I think just before we start, so the context, obviously in the town meeting, we talked about the library and relocating the library. We started to talk about Holy Angels Church and trying to disposition that and figure out what we were going to do with it. We talked about using $10,000 to have this rendering created of what an entire re-envisioned downtown could look like, including multiple properties. And so we're going to work with the Economic Development Committee to use that money to re-envision what the downtown could look like in aggregate. And I was very clear about this at the time, that we need to talk about it in phases, because the key with these phases is that we need to start with something and make progress and not try to do everything at once, but have people understand the context within which we're operating. So the goal with the $10,000 is to set a context for a plan of what the downtown could look like, and then phase one will be specifically what I think Mr. McCormick is going to be talking about in part. So with that, Mr. McCormick, go ahead.
Thank you for the intro. Again, Bill McCormick, I live at 112 Main Street. 2 days ago, I celebrated 30 years in Upton. So
congratulations.
Been involved in a few committees in town, and this is an exciting one. And our goal tonight here, we introduced Donna Desjardins, who's also on the committee, and Steve Racketon, also on the committee. What we have is a draft, just so you all understand. It's just a draft. Hasn't been approved by our committee. This is a working document. We wanted to try to put a fence around what we mean when we talk about phase one of this downtown revitalization project. In the town meeting, for those that were there was a lot of discussion about a lot of things in a lot of direction. What we'd like to try to do is to see if we can go quickly through this plan to outline where we, the Economic Development Committee, think we need to go to try to work on this project across the street here. So, starting at the top of the page there, the Selectmen appointed this committee to really help do three things. To talk about zoning in this downtown area, and perhaps revise that, and we have drafts that we're working on. And that zoning change will allow additional uses, okay, for properties. The second thing is this downtown project specifically. And third, overall, an economic plan developed for the town. So, about this downtown revitalization, some of the goals there are to really get better economic use out of those parcels that the town owns. I'm going to go quickly. I'm not going to read you every line on this page, but the point of this is we believe that underperforming properties can provide more revenue to the town. So specifically, the town owns a couple parcels, as you see in the essential parcels component here. The town owns a couple parcels, and there's a couple that are privately owned. So those parcels are 3 Milford Street, the church, the town parking lot, the Grove Street lot, which was the former oil company lot, and 1 Milford Street, which is the storefronts and 4 apartments above. So those are the parcels that we're talking about specifically. If you turn to page 2, you can kind of see how we've kind of defined those. And there are the 4 contiguous ones on the inside of that turn across from the town hall. So those are the parcels. This is a little bit of an older tax map. There's really not those 2 things that I mark as 1 Milford. That really is 1 lot. So that's the space that we're talking about. Those are the high-level goals that we're talking about. Other components that got talked about a little bit at the town meeting and are an important part of this downtown revitalization, but it's kind of a phase 2. You know, the library building, the Racine building, and potentially 8 Grove Street, they've been talked about for years as perhaps a solution for a library, council of aging, perhaps other uses. So to be clear, what we're really talking about is those first parcels at this time, and you know, the Library Council of Aging Committee will be working very hard to work on plans for those other parcels. So the process to get there. We really need involvement of all town entities, okay? So FinCom, Conservation, Historical, all different town departments need to weigh in early and give us some direction of what they want as input to this project. We then want to get taxpayer input, and we want to do it in a few different ways. We want to try to go to each and every group in the next month, if we can. Go to their meeting, outline this plan, get input from them, and see what we can take away to make a better presentation, to do bigger public forums, perhaps back at the high school again. When we get to a place where we have a recommendation, there's other factors that weigh in too. We now need to get agreement on the parcels that are privately owned. We need to better understand the state roadway project and how that may change anything coming through this area. After we gather all that info, we can come up with some alternatives. And I just put some very sketchy alternatives here, Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3. And each have pros and cons, and each of those need to be flushed out in great detail. When we get through that point, then we can provide a recommendation to the selectmen, and then perhaps we can move forward with a special town meeting to give the selectmen the ability to negotiate the parcels owned by the town, those 2 specific parcels. When they have that power, and when we have an agreement with the private landowners, then we can go ahead and issue an RFP. This RFP will outline, using all the input we got from all these meetings, what kind of look and feel can we try to influence the developer to include in the building. Now, I want to make the distinction here that this is a private project. The town's not buying these buildings. The town is not paying for this construction project. It's a private project. The Milford paper last week even talked about it as a municipal project. Well, we really need to talk about the Library Council of Aging as a municipal building, a municipal project. This is something a little bit different. So let me see. So when we get the RFP issued, then we will pick a developer that we think is going to meet our needs, meet our pricing with what we want to do with respect to any town parcels. We'll award a contract and demolition can begin. Now, how long does this all take? We don't know at this point. I didn't put any dates on this document. We think we can accomplish a lot in the next 2 months. So as we sit here, we've done this as a project plan. We have Donna putting together lists of all the people that will sit still in town that we can talk to. And we're going to go do that. We welcome people to come forward and talk to us as well. Don't wait for one of those meetings. When we get to the point where we are ready, we will go to item B there to go to a special town meeting. At that town meeting, then we'll have the power to go ahead and issue that RFP. Once the selectmen are granted that, and they'll be granted that based on everyone's input, based on everyone's agreement that we're going down the right road, then we'll issue the RFP and see what we get for a developer that will work with us in a way, in a time frame that we want. Jump in.
You covered it all. This is a process, and it is something that we really need to spend some more time discussing with the different boards and commissions in town.
Yeah, I think that's what we learned at the last meeting.
Yes.
I mean, us being around it all the time, we hear
And
everything that's going on, but we
everyone will
don't get it
have
out
an
in the
opinion.
community. enough,
Everyone
so.
has an opinion.
Right.
But it does come down, where do we see the town going? What do we want to do? How do we want to look? What are our weaknesses? What are our strengths as we move forward in development? I mean, I moved here, I don't know how many years ago, 40. I've always heard we need to strengthen our economic base. That our taxes are based just about solely on residential. And this has been talked about for many, many years by many, many different people. And it's easy to hit a barrier. I think we need to really discuss and figure out how to get over the barriers and really decide, we're at a tipping point right now. What is the best thing for Upton? How do we move forward? How do we want to look? And how do we want to manage ourselves?
I think, as you said, an important fact there is to separate. I think that's the major overwhelming, what I drew from the town meeting was people were uneasy, they didn't understand, how the Racine building fit into it, how the Library and Council of Aging. So I think if you separate this into 2 projects, as Bill has suggested, and I think with some public forum, if we just concentrate on, again, those parcels, Bill, those 4 parcels that you have outlined, and if we focus on that part of the project in the short run and get the people's input, and, you know, do forums similar to what were done with marijuana referendum, I think that's definitely the best plan of attack. Derek and I talked about that.
I think,
day or
to go
two
back
after.
what Brett said, we need a multi-phased idea. We just can't be focused on one little area. We gotta be looking at the overall scheme of the project while we're discussing this too.
So I just think that when you get big, you know, we're scaring people when you think about it in a big picture, too big a picture. I think if we just narrow our focus a little, I think we have a better chance of success. I agree with what the grand scheme could look like, but I think in the short run, we need to sort of look at the 50-yard line, so to say.
So at the meeting, we were given some funds that we can go ahead and start to cast a picture like this. And we'll do that because that will be the number one question. What's the big picture look like? So we'll do what we can with the money allowed and the time allowed. Again, we're focusing on a total of 1.3 acres across the street. Okay, that's kind of what this project is about. We wouldn't be here if Derek didn't go out and start this idea as an economic development committee, get funding for us, so credit to our town manager for getting us this far.
The other thing to keep in mind too is this first phase, the project across the street, isn't going to impact the taxes, our taxes at all, because it's a private project.
And it will in fact benefit taxpayers because it'll be increasing the tax base.
It will have a huge benefit in terms of generating revenue back to the town in terms of taxes on the property. And we need to get the assessors to give us, you know, some numbers as to how much would we be talking about based on what a reasonable sized building could be placed there.
And I think
the other building, the library, the senior center, that building is going to impact our taxes. So, you know, that's the thing that I think we need to make sure everyone understands. One project has a positive impact on taxes to the town, whereas the other one is going to affect our taxes in terms of funding the cost of the building. So, and the other thing too is the two buildings, if they get built, need to exist and look like they were done with one vision. They can't be two radically different, you know, buildings. They need to look like they fit together, even though one is private and one is municipal.
It's such an important thing. I think that's one of the reasons we want to have a view of what all these parcels could look like and how we might integrate all of them so that people can put in context and feel comfortable with phase one, which is redeveloping and revitalizing this immediate part of downtown, and then a later phase dealing with the library and the Council on Aging and the senior center and the property just across the stream. So breaking it out that way I think is really important, and I think what's so exciting about phase one of this is that, you know, it's a win-win for the town because it'll help us bring in tax revenue. It will revitalize the downtown and bring more people into a downtown area that doesn't get utilized right now with the empty building and the record shop and those other buildings. I don't see a lot of activity around there. And then the third thing it will do is it will allow us to sort of take an area that hasn't been invested in, that's currently just a field with some storage containers and some trailers and this abandoned building, and really make it into something special that is even more charming and has more New England character than what's there now. And I think for me that's the number one priority, and the beauty of this project is that we can do both of those things, or all three of those things. We can revitalize the area, we can increase the New England charm, and we can offset the taxes that the taxpayers are paying. So, you know, this is a great project. Appreciate the Economic Development Committee's leadership in this. The partnership with the Historic Commission as well is really important to help make sure we get the aesthetics right, and the fact that we can do that and have the ability to do that is really important. So this is a great project.
So in closing, our chairman, Gene Burnett, is away at business tonight. He's in sync with what we're doing here. And also on the bottom, I put the email address that goes to everyone on our committee. So we invite you all to either approach us separately through that email or however people like to.
I know Mr. Flaherty, you handed it up fast.
To go along with what Mr. Simons just alluded to, new building, the whole thing. It's also going to clean up this crazy intersection on here, which is also important.
Well, the state has indicated that when they eventually get around to redoing 140, they might be inclined to want to put a rotary in the center of town.
Well, it's going to be addressed.
Yeah, so that will address, you know, the fact that you take your life in your hands when you cross the street here, hopefully.
Because I even,
I'm just saying that that's another advantage, another reason to pursue this road.
and I heard the state might even give us that little strip of land between the road and the white building now.
Okay. Talk to the manager on that.
One second. Mr. Desjardins, in the back, sorry.
What we have to remember is we've got a beautiful building here, thank you. It cost $7 million. Now, if we're talking about the town doing many more buildings, prices have gone up. And I would want to really be a taxpayer that starts paying those taxes, especially when you're talking probably 14 million enough for 2 buildings to be repaired. That's why that whatever we do, we should have private contractors for it. They don't have to pay the prevailing wage. We do. And as we know here from this town hall, it makes things very expensive. Thank you.
Ma'am?
Just a really quick
Can
question.
you just introduce yourself?
Oh,
We're not-
sure.
Sorry.
How are you? I'm sorry. Just around, it's a really exciting time, but I'm just really curious about the communication around all of this because I think you all addressed that there's a lot of confusion. And so for people that aren't here tonight, what are some of the other ways in which that we'll share
We're good.
some of the...
Yeah, we talked about that. We're gonna do
Go ahead.
signboards,
Oh.
more social media, all that kind of stuff.
I think one of the town website is fantastic.
Mhm.
I mean, you can see any meeting coming up, all the meetings are posted, all the meetings are open. People just really need to attend the meetings, or in the least, look in the agenda and look at the minutes as a way to inform themselves. Because
I think
it's really difficult to get around to everybody to talk to.
I think
specifically
with no, I was gonna say with Twitter and Facebook, I think that's the way we could
Yeah,
really
exactly.
target a lot of the
Exactly.
younger crowds in Upton.
So if there's any particular group that you're a part of or represent or know of,
Sorry for stepping on.
reach out to us and we'll talk.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and like I know a lot of even my friends in the community are they're very interested and very curious, but sometimes the times don't like work out properly and things
Right.
like that, which you can't please everyone, right? But like
No, that's-
just trying to understand the different modalities that might be out there and addressing sort of the broader community as well.
And I think we've found in a lot of cases that it's not any one way of communication, it's all of them, right? So like, I'm on Facebook, I put things on Facebook and say, hey, there's a meeting tonight. Other people do that as well. Not everybody's on Facebook. So, sending out emails, you can sign up to receive town-related emails on the town website, and you'll get notices of when the various meetings are. So that's another way to get it. The town Twitter account, we send things out on the town Twitter account. The other one is for these meetings, that we're going to have at least 2, if not 3, public forums to talk about phase 1 of this revitalization, and that's where we expect to get the most input. And we've talked with the DPW director and Derek about, for those meetings, putting up those highway signs, because I think a lot of people just notice those. They're just driving around town. People aren't really checking the website. They're not looking for meetings. They don't necessarily check Twitter or my Facebook account. So having those signs up can make a big difference. So we're gonna do all of that. We're gonna do all of that to get people's input.
Yeah, I think however we can
Spread
be
the word.
creative around it,
Yeah.
I think is a really good thing. Because
Yep.
I think there's a lot of interest and a lot of positive
Definitely.
interest.
And any ideas or anything, any way you think we can add to that or get people involved, like, we need all the help we can get. I keep saying that, so that's awesome.
Mr. Town Manager?
There's a
Well,
question.
no, that was my question, that, we always think that we're doing as much as we can to communicate our message to the public, but oftentimes we fail. So if you have any ideas that you think that we should be doing, whether that be
Yeah.
flyers we send out to the schools, anything you think that would help us to communicate a message, we're more than happy to do. Because again, we're a short staff, we try to do as much as we can, but we know that we're missing that message oftentimes.
There's another question. How you feel? Did you have another question?
I was just going to say,
say, Molly Smith, I live on Elm Street. With this whole project, I think visuals are a great way to lead anything, where, you know, with phase one, whatever that visual may be, if you lead with the visual, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, I know the schools do email blasts out, I don't know if they'll let you get into that.
We can, yes.
Okay. But, you know, stuff like that where you can get a visual so it at least catches someone's attention a little bit more than just like meeting date and time. So they already know, they're gonna possibly buy this and reorganize this way. You know, I think it'll pique someone's interest a little bit more. Visuals.
Tonight you got your first visual.
I'm usually like color. One other question is how soon is phase one? When is the next meeting going to be in relation to that? So we can kind of get that word out to people that we know are kind of interested in this and seeing a kind of revamp.
Our economic development committee meets next week again, right?
In front of the planning board, I believe.
Right, so it's the first time we've got to get together and have our next working session.
Okay.
This was put together by one or two of us, okay? So we need to apply dates. I had dates on it, I backed off.
Yeah. So I would say over the next 2 to 3 months reasonably, right, there's going to be a lot of meetings. So the biggest thing is plug into the Economic Development Committee. You can see when their meetings are on the website, or just call or ask these guys, or ask call the town clerk and she'll let you know when they are. But if you keep going to those, you'll be keeping pace with everything that's going on, because that's the committee that's running it.
Perfect. Very great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
And then our last agenda item for the night is the discussion of the FY20 budget. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Town Manager, since you put the documents together.
Sure. So, at least to start the conversation,
You got this there.
I've sent out the...
No, it's all right.
I've sent out the budget message and budget calendar to the town departments that report directly to the Board of Selectmen. And I think you received copies of that. And so in that budget memo, I kind of described the current fiscal environment that we operate under today, and recognizing that the values have only increased by 2% this past year as far as evaluations, and recognizing that we don't anticipate any major local aid contributions from the state coming up, although we've seen some small increases through Chapter 90. What I've instructed the town departments to do is to provide a level service budget. So a level service budget just basically, by definition, allows for inflation. So when we think about utility costs and other costs that have gone up, that we're not increasing the types of services that we offer, but we're maintaining those services. And so, again, that would require an uptick in our budget because inflation increases. So just to put a little of this in context as far as who we are and where we are today, I passed out this budget document. And what I tried to do is look at the FY19 budget and then break that down by discipline. And so as you can see here, that 57% of the town's budget falls within the school side. And the remaining 43% fall on the municipal side. And on the municipal side, you'll see that 14% of our budget is constructed of our public safety departments of fire, police, emergency management, our code enforcement department, and our 911 dispatches. 10% of our budget falls within what I would define as our administration and finance, and that's made up of our Board of Selectmen budgets, town accountant, conservation commission, planning, the clerk's office, and Board of Assessors, just to name a few. And so you can certainly review the chart at your leisure, but what I did when you moved to the column to the right is I adjusted for there are known fixed costs in our budget. And so oftentimes I say that when we look at our budget, there are many things that are really challenging to cut out. So over 85% of our budget is made up of personnel and fixed costs. And so I try to identify some of those fixed costs in the column to the right that, based upon negotiations with our collective bargaining agreements with our 4 unions, we will experience a 2.5% COLA, which represents across the board of municipal budget, municipal wages about $110,000. We've been asked by Maya to budget conservatively when it comes to our insurance increases at 10%. So as you can see from some of these numbers outpace our Prop 2.5%, in which we have to stay under. And then our pension costs went up last year, so each year the Worcester Retirement pension system sends us a bill, and we have to pay that bill. We don't have they're not asking us to pay it, we are required to pay that. And so last year, our pension contributions increased by $50,000. And then having a discussion today with staff from the Board of Health office, our fixed cost of trash pickup each year is $422,000. So those are just some fixed costs that, unless there were major policy decisions that were made, we're going to have to continue to pay. So that would bring us total projections of $682,000 for a total projection of about $23 million. And so just, again, for discussion's sake, I try to represent what 1% of that $23 million would look like at $234,000, and then what the the school's share of that 1% would represent about $133,000. So I use that as a discussion point so that as we go through budget discussions, and we plan to, and here's the budget calendar, I fully expect to provide a draft budget to the Board of Selectmen on January 15th, where we can start those budget discussions. But certainly, it would be time well spent that we have these discussions today as far as expectations of the budget, so that when we come before the board at our next session on January 15th to discuss those budget recommendations, we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I personally think the way you're going is correct right now. I'm not sure how my colleagues feel with the level service. So, anything, Steve?
Yeah, I would think we definitely would want to be level service. I think as I think back to last year, there were some policy decisions, maybe say like with regard to overtime, something like that. I know overtime will vary by whatever the union contract is, but I think it's important if we stay tight to that framework. I don't know if there's any recurring capital items that, we're thinking about eliminating this year. I'm not sure about that. Have any thoughts?
Yeah, I just keep coming back to the same thing. I sound like a broken record, but can we get a view of major capital expenses over the next 10 years of what people expect? Whether it's infrastructure, equipment, fire engines, plows, dump trucks. Again, I make up the number, I don't care, over $10,000, over $25,000. Something so that we know, because I know that every time one of these things comes down the pike, there's a contingent in town that are like, of course we want to do that. And then there's the same contingent oftentimes is saying, I don't want you to raise taxes. I don't want you to spend money. Why are you spending this $25,000 to do this study? Yet they want a $600,000 piece of equipment. So I want to make sure that we can plan and forecast and be thoughtful about the infrastructure and the capital investments that we're making. So please work with the town departments, fire, EMS, DPW, work with the schools, work with whoever we need to work with to make sure that we know what the major expenses are planned for the next 5 to 10 years, so that we're not making it up every 6 months and having arguments about whether or not we should spend $500,000 on some piece of equipment. Because again, I'll say it again, a lot of times it's this very same people that are complaining about taxes that are asking us to spend $500,000, $1 million on a piece of equipment. So I want to be clear that when we have conversations about $25,000 or $50,000, that we can put those in context and say, that's not the way that we're going to drive down the tax rate, is by spending a lot of time arguing about a little bit of money. The way we're going to drive down the tax rate, if that's what people want to do, is to make major cuts to all of these items that are here that we spend money on, or to not reinvest in the community. I'm not advocating for either one of those things. I don't support either one of those things in any material way, but that's what we have to do, and I think we have to get out of the business of playing small ball and arguing over $10,000, $20,000, and $30,000 and start focusing on our long-term capital plan. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I appreciate those comments. I actually had a meeting today with the new chairman of the Capital Budget Committee, Dan Lazar. We had a meeting this afternoon, and he's very interested in trying to take the Capital Budget Committee to the next level and assist the town with that 10-year capital improvement plan. Right now, as you know, we have a 5-year capital improvement plan, and it's good, certainly could be a lot better. If you have an opportunity to review my budget memo, I wrote in the capital budget plan that only items that are in the CIP will be considered. And so for those towns, to your point, that haven't submitted their capital, we aren't going to consider, and I don't know if they have in the past, I haven't been here long enough, but we are no longer going to consider any capital items unless they're in the plan, unless it's been properly vetted by a capital budget committee. But I think to your point, it's going to take some time to get to that 10-year capital outlook, but I think it's certainly something that's realistic.
I think the basis is already there, because we do have that book. It's just, I don't think it's digital enough, I don't think it's out in the public enough.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it's like anything, like I would love to, can we get this posted somehow, or so people know this and see it, somebody can come and take this too and look at it, and so when we have handouts like that, like, people need to look at this stuff and absorb it, and they're willing to learn, we should help them learn.
I mean, the only thing when I look at like these fixed costs that jump out to my mind, right? Mr. Giordano, you still on the Board of Health? When's the last time we bid out our trash service to see if we can get a better deal?
2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Last year.
And the board, and I've been working with the Board of Health staff, they're working on a new RFP for this winter. But again, talking to them, because of recycling has gone up, the world economy has changed the recycling business, they have stated that they fully expect that number of $422,000 to go up even after going up to bid.
Now, most of that is offset by the trash bag revenue.
Well, 50%.
50%. So I guess now the question is, is that a situation where we can just hold that at the 50%? Will the cost of bags then go up? Most likely.
Right. So yeah, the program's only subsidized through the trash bag program, through selling the trash bags, and they said it brings in approximately 50% of the total cost of the program.
You had a question, Molly?
Molly Smith again. I've also noticed on a lot of social media stuff, people complaining about the recycling in town. How it's gotten even more strict over the past year or 2 years, or maybe people are just trying to finally catch up with the new regulations of what you can and cannot recycle. So you mentioned something about recycling. Is that something that a lot of towns are seeing? Or is it just Harvey Industries that we're having the issues?
I think a lot of people weren't aware of what you could recycle, and you just assumed all your plastic bags
And I know
should go
some
in your
people
trash.
have been getting postings, I think, at their mailbox because they're recycling the wrong items, like the plastic bags from a grocery store or pizza boxes or whatever those items may be.
I got the pizza box one just last
But
week.
you know what? I definitely have done that, and I've never been reprimanded, so here I am putting the stuff still in. But through these great forums, I learned, so I didn't know, is this recycling going up? Is this common throughout the?
Recycling industry has changed dramatically. I wish our DPW director was still here, but it has changed dramatically to the point where up 10 years ago, municipalities were paying towns to come into their community to take the recycling because this is revenue generator. I would say a large portion of the recycling that's collected today is actually just being incinerated because China is no longer accepting what I would say the U.S. is trash. And so that has created a huge impact on the recycling industry. So that's why you're starting to see waste haulers are starting to try to really hone in on what they can actually make money off of and what they can't, because all that other stuff just goes to waste.
And I know, like, I'm guilty with the plastic bags. I always thought I was doing something good. And I talked to somebody, and they say them bags clog up all the machines. So
Yeah. I never heard that about pizza boxes.
Yeah, they got
cardboard is cardboard, right? But while we're having this conversation.
We went from budget to pizza.
While we're having this conversation,
more people
I
come to
guess-
these meetings. This is great.
If we were to just, hypothetically, if we were to look at our budget and say, is there any way to make a 2% reduction? We understand we have COLA that would obviously increase by 2%. Is there any way to make a 2% reduction in our operating budget?
A 2% reduction in our overall operating budget would represent approximately $470,000. And so if we were going to share that burden, then the school's share of that burden, I say schools, I mean both schools that we contribute to, would represent about $260,000. So we'd have to have conversations with both school superintendents and ask them to cut their budgets by $260,000.
That's why I think it's as simple as whatever you cut comes off this pie. So however much we want to cut, it's how much of those services do you want to cut? Do you want to cut teachers? Do you want to cut firefighters, police officers, DPW workers? That's what people have to decide.
We really don't have a lot of meat and potatoes.
Well, I always say that
Like you said, 80% of everything is personnel, so.
you can't balance the budget on cutting pens and paper, and, one less stop at WB Mason for boxes of paper. So you really, the cuts are going to be made in personnel, because those are your biggest cost drivers. Like I said earlier, the fixed costs we can't change. I mean, certainly, I put in the spreadsheet recurring articles of $1.2 million. And those recurring articles represent our pension contributions, our streets and sidewalks of $530,000. I mean, from my understanding, there's been a huge commitment made to repairing our infrastructure. So, that would be a major policy change if we decided to cut that number out of there. But you could certainly, to reach that number you spoke of, we could cut the streets and sidewalks line item of $530,000. But that's a policy decision. And then again, OPEB of $100,000 as well, which we know right now we have a $7 million OPEB liability.
I, for one, support Steve's position of level funding. I think
He wants 2%.
No, he just said level fund. I know he was asking a question about what it would take to cut 2%, but initially it started off saying that he supported the level funding approach that Derek is recommending, and I support Steve.
I agree with that.
There is one other thing that I figured I would throw out there. We had a question at semi-annual town meeting, and it was in regard to tree service. And I know in our budget last year, our operations budget, we do have some money that is earmarked.
That's right.
For tree work.
47,000.
Is that what it is?
I think that was what was that what we were talking about? No, 47,000?
Right.
That's what he's got left.
Okay. So, I'm thinking maybe for May, it may be a good time to earmark some money for that. We seem to have a lot of limbs and trees that are overhanging the roads. More and more people are mentioning it to me. And I'm kind of thinking it'd be probably better to be proactive than reactive, have something happen. So I don't know what you get for 47,000.
He said it's going to be a lot of money. He said 47,000 is not even going to touch it. I'm looking at a couple $100,000.
Does that do one road? Does that do half a mile?
We should ask Dennis to come and talk to us about that, because everybody driving around knows the moths killed a lot of trees, and there's a lot of dead trees on the side of the road, and they're fine now because they'll stand for a few years, but eventually they're all coming down.
So before the meeting started, myself and Mr. Flaherty did talk to Dennis.
What did he say?
He's got to drive around because he wants to give us an actual idea of how many trees would need to come. He doesn't want to give us a number without actually doing like a survey or study.
Like an audit?
Well, I mean, I drive around and look at all the trees. I don't need
He
to go
doesn't
and
want to just arbitrarily say X amount. He wants to come in and tell us an exact figure.
9 o'clock.
Did we cut the electric budget?
We did.
Where's the glasses?
We gotta remember that now that the meetings are at 7, lights go off at 9.
Okay. That takes care of that, I guess.
And it's
Curtain call.
Did you see her curtain?
Go ahead, Mr. Flaherty.
I'm chiming on this.
Yes.
For years, I've said, you gotta spend money on these trees. I figure you gotta spend $100,000 a year for 3 to 4 years and go through and get these hangers. And when I say hangers, I'm not talking about a branch that's broken off. I'm talking about the ones that are still attached, that are hanging over the road, hanging on the utility lines. I lost power twice in 2 days last week. Why? Because a little old branch came down and touched the primary and started a fire. And you call grid and they turn the power off and they do this and they do that. Most of these people go up, they've been to New Hampshire, you've been to Maine. Just ride along the streets up there and say, do you see trees hanging over the road? Do you see trees hanging over the power lines? I mean, it's crazy in this town. If a squirrel bursts, the power goes off, a limb comes down, something happens, okay? The lucky people are the ones who go down here and reside driving down by the school, because most of the time when we have a problem in town, that part's fed from Northbridge, they don't lose their power, but most of the other town does. Be that as it may. The utility, years and years ago, the utility used to take care of clear the rights of way. Got news for you, boys and girls, they're not gonna do it anymore, all right? So the only way you're gonna do it is do it yourself. Yeah, people here say, oh, my taxes are too high, my taxes are too high. Well, you ought to get something for your tax dollar. You ought to be able to keep your lights on if you get a little snowstorm or windstorm or something like that. So I've advocated this, I've talked to people for years. You gotta spend $100 grand a year for 3 or 4 years. Get down to Westboro Road, take out that whole cover tree. You'll save money on snow removal because the sun will get to the road and melt the ice.
Yeah, most of your commuter roads are like that. You know, you see Mendon Street, Chestnut Street, Glenview, a lot of those roads. I mean, it's unusual that the trees are, you know, growing that far over the roadway. We've talked about it many times.
Over time, you and I haven't agreed on a hell of a lot of things, but I think we agree on this.
That might be one of them. That might have been the first and last.
Right, but no.
Where's the reporter? I want to get this written down.
Wait a minute, just said that. That's true. This is actually a good year if we're getting an additional $63,000 in Chapter 90 money, right?
Yes.
We could take that 63,000, maybe peel back a little off that 530 number, and earmark $100,000 in a warrant article for tree removal. Separate from the operating budget.
Can I
As a
point
separate article that would be awarded, and again, that would be year one of a
Can I
3
point
year
something
plan.
out to you?
But we don't want our roads to decline. I mean, if we got 1.2 million in free
Can I
cash.
point something out to you, Mr. Taggart?
Yes.
Members of the board. You just signed a paper tonight here, this L50 or whatever it is that you signed. It said, you know there's $247,000 in the money that you could have raised, but you chose not to.
That's right.
Period.
We're not talking about that. I'm talking about the 63,000 that we are gonna have in additional Chapter 90 money.
And you don't think the roads in this town need that, sir? What's the matter?
The trees need it more.
You agreed for like 30 seconds.
Marcia, that's it.
Yeah, but
A few years ago, the state of Massachusetts put pressure on the electric company after major power outages to go out and start trimming trees again, or they were going to take action against them. And they did this for like a year or so, and they stopped. Maybe we could go back to our state representatives and see if they can do something, because we're getting back into that time where, and I agree, I mean, we have power outages constantly, and most of it is branches coming down.
can you reach out to?
Yeah, because we're not the only ones that have this issue. Like, those moths killed trees all over the place. We're not the only town that's facing an unbelievable increase in the number of dead trees over our roads.
And ask Dennis to get us a number, what he would need, or a time frame, or how many, you know, is something you could do in 1 year, 2 years, how many trees? I think we're all in agreement,
Derek.
the level service budget. Do you need anything else from us? other
Way to
than
bring it home.
To tell you to go with level service?
Yep, level services, my direction.
Bring this.
Can I just throw one other thing?
We're on to public comment.
It's up to the chairman, it's up to the chairman.
What's your pie chart there and your thing? You have no idea what the folks down the road are gonna do, you know? You can, there's probably gonna be a reduction from Valley Tech because of the reduced number of students for the second year. And you have no idea what's gonna happen from the Mendon Upland school system. So. And you're not gonna know for, well, their budget hearing is sometime in May because it has to be done 45 days before the first town meeting. So.
Yeah, their budget meeting will be January, February, probably.
Do you guys have any new business?
I don't have anything.
How do people like the 7 o'clock start time?
6 is better.
I got 1 thumbs up and 1 6 is better.
7?
7? Good, okay. See, new people, 7 o'clock, bringing in new blood if we go to 7. All right.
It's 6 o'clock, everyone.
That's at 6 the power doesn't go up. Fair, Mr. Chairman, fair.
I think we stay with 7, we gotta start doing our executive sessions at 6.
At 6:30 or 6. I agree with that.
So, any look-ahead topics? So, the board's going to enter executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 214, Section 1B, and Mass General Law, Chapter 4, Section 7, Clause 26C, to discuss financial assistance to its president in need. After that, we're going to go into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section A, or Chapter 30A, Section 21, Exemption 2, to conduct strategic session planning with negotiating with a non-union personnel. Gary Doherty, aye.
Aye. Brett Simon.
Stephen Metellian, aye?
Brett Simon, aye. Thanks, everybody.